recording, so I think we'll be fine. Zoom control shift. So, yeah, all right. So here we go. Let me share my screen with you guys, and what we're looking at is the Emily Dickinson Nearpod. If you haven't worked with Nearpod before, and everyone in here says they haven't worked with Nearpod before, it's fairly easy. If you're on your computers and you've already split your screen or whatever, and then have me on one side and that on the other, you can click that link there. It opens up a video, and we're going to go through the video. I'm going to go through it live, but I'm not going to supply answers. I'm going to want you to supply answers as we go. So for you guys in here, make sure that you're muted, at least on your computers as well, because when the video comes up, it's going to start playing. I'm going to have to give you cues to continue so that we're roughly on the same thing. I don't want you to put earphones in. I just kind of want you to go through it. It's about 10 minutes. So with all the questions and stuff, make sure that you log in with Google when it comes up with Nearpod. Log in with Google. And because it's a link, it should take you directly to that spot. You don't have to put in a code or anything else. Choose your school account. And I'm going through it with you. So, yes, continue. It is me. It is I. Not that that was really appropriate. There we go. Emily Dickinson. So this guy speaks really, really fast. So you're going to have to pay attention. I'm going to have him out loud in the classroom. Hopefully, everyone else who, hopefully I don't miss anybody signing in to the Zoomcast. But I'm going to have to cut my mic off and cut it back on from time to time. So keep that in mind. All right. So here we go. All right. Remember, he's pretty fast. Maybe I should go full screen. Can I do that? I don't think I can. Let's see. Nah, I don't have an option for full screen. Well, that's terrible. All right, so here we go with the video.
Supervisor is Meredith Danko. The associate producer is Danica Johnson. Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course Literature, and today we're going to talk about this lady, Emily Dickinson. By the way, we don't have a book today because she's on my nook. Emily Dickinson was a great 19th century American poet. Mr. Green, I already know everything about her. She was a recluse, and you can sing all of her poems to the tune of I'd like to buy the world a Coke. Like, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Stop me from the past. You cannot sing. Fortunately, your inability to sing does insulate us from copyright claims, because I, for one, did not recognize that as if I could buy the world a Coke. Also, Dickinson's theater is more complicated than you're making it out to be, but yes, you could sing most of her poems too if I could buy the world a Coke. Also, Yellow Rose of Texas. More importantly, these poems have a lot to say about the relationship between death and life, between faith and doubt, between the power of God and the power of individuals. So let's focus on that, because it actually might change your life and stuff.
So the first question is, how much do you already know about Emily Dickinson's poetry? So, and I'll put up here, and you see my answers. I'll share later, but I want your answers in there, and just take a couple of seconds to do that. And if you have any thoughts, how much do you know about Emily Dickinson before today? Anybody ever hear the name Emily Dickinson? Anybody in here? Show of hands. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. All right. So. Now, if your version of Emily Dickinson is a movie that was, or a TV series that's on Apple TV, that's a totally different thing of Emily Dickinson, but it's another author's or director's, producer, whatever. It's their perspective, another actress's perspective. It's a very interesting perspective too. So I don't necessarily recommend it because I mean it's kind of for older, I guess. But I can't make any recommendations. But it's out there if you want to see Apple TV. It's out there. So 1, 2, 3, continue playing.
Stuff. So Joyce Carol once called Emily Dickinson the most paradoxical of poets, the very poet of paradox. And this can really frustrate students and literary critics alike, particularly when Dickinson seems to contradict herself within a single poem. Take, for example, this bit of light verse. Faith is a fine invention when gentlemen can see, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency. So this seems like a pretty pro-science, anti-religion poem, right? I mean, faith is put in quotation marks and called an invention. But she also implies the possibility of a different and valuable kind of sight only available to some people at some times, when gentlemen can see. And this is where
This is where the next question comes in. Why was Dickinson been called the most paradoxical of poets? Oh, and I guess you already see my answer. So she often contradicted herself within the same poem. She often contradicted herself within the same poem. All right, so let me collapse that. All right. Interesting. I want to keep going. All right, so we're going to keep going. 1, 2, 3.
See. And this is where it becomes important to look at how Dickinson, for lack of a better phrase, sees sight. Dickinson often imagines seeing as a form of power, so much so that seeing, not just literal sight, but also the ability to witness and observe and understand, becomes the central expression of the self. Like her famous poem that begins, "I heard a fly buzz when I died," ends with the line, "I could not see to see," associating the lack of sight with death itself. Dickinson also often played with the fact that this eye and this eye sound the same. Her poem beginning before I got my eye put out is about death, for instance, not just monocularization. In that poem, she clearly associates sight not just with the power to observe, but with ownership. She writes, "But were it told to me today that I might have the sky for mine, I tell you that my heart would split for size of me. The meadows, mine. The mountains, mine." Of course, in 19th century America, the idea that an eye, possibly a female eye, could own the mountains, the meadows, and the sky was a little bit radical. I mean, all that stuff was supposed to be under the control of God, not any human being who could see it. All of this is made even more complex and interesting by the fact that Dickinson's poems sounded like hymns, and throughout her life, you could see her faith waxing and waning in her poetry.
All right, another pause. So, is he hard to keep up with? I mean, he's like all over the map. All right, in her poetry, Dickinson often linked eyesight with self-expression. So, you didn't have the option for death, although she did talk about see as death, and I could not see to see, that's dying. It kind of give you some hints on some things to look for. Did anybody have trouble with "because I could not stop for death" when you read it? Anybody get to that point yet? A lot of people do. We are going to explore that poem specifically. Maybe not today, but we'll see. All right, so I'm going to continue playing in 1, 2, 3.
Poetry. In short, I don't think you can make easy conclusions about microscopes and faith in Dickinson's poetry, but that's precisely what's so important about it. Dickinson's work reflects a conflicted American worldview. I mean, we're a nation of exceptional individuals who believe that we control our success and our happiness, but we are also more likely to profess a belief in an omnipotent God than people in any other industrialized nation. All right, I know you guys want all the creepy, macabre details of Dickinson's biography, so let's go to the thought bubble. So Emily Dickinson was born in 1830 to a prominent family. Her father became a U.S. congressman and lived her whole life in Massachusetts. She was haunted by what she called the menace of death throughout her life, although then again, who isn't? Between 1858 and 1865, Dickinson wrote nearly 800 poems, but she also became increasingly confined to her home in those years, and eventually rarely left her room. She usually talked to visitors from the other side of a closed door, and didn't even leave her room when her father's funeral took place downstairs. Dickinson published fewer than a dozen poems in her lifetime. In fact, no one knew knew that she'd been nearly so prolific until her sister discovered more than 1,800 poems after Emily's death in 1886. Dickinson was considered an eccentric in Amherst and known locally for only wearing white when she was spotted outside the home. In fact, her only surviving article of clothing is a white cotton dress. This image of a pale, wraith-clad, all in white, become a symbol of the reclusive, brilliant poet. But it's worth noting that for Dickinson, white was not the color of innocence or purity or ghosts. It was the color of passion and intensity.
Okay, so here we go for the next one. So I don't pay attention to my writing. I put White Wedding just because of Billy Idol and music, but I didn't want to give any answers. Why do you think the color white is often associated with innocence and purity? It's not specifically talking about Emily Dickinson, but why is it innocence and purity? So, and you'll type something in there. So, if you're gonna come in here, wear the mask. All the way. All right, we're pausing for a brief interruption just because of more folks entering the classrooms going to learn about Emily Dickinson. So you guys will be able to work on anything that whatever she told you to do, but we're also doing live recording. So just so you'll know. All right. All right, so what do you think the color white is associated with? Why is it pure? Why is it often associated with pure? Okay. Oh, gotta step away from my fans. It's a base color. Okay. Are those for the video? Are those for the video? Or you have music playing and good video? Please take it out. You're not supposed to have those in during the classroom. So I do provide time for that, but not during this. All right, so she said that the white is a base color, so that's why it could be associated with purity. What else? Give us some examples of some of the things we see white associated with purity. Oh, how about wedding? I put white wedding just because bride, that bride wears white. So that's kind of a tradition, and it's been a tradition for a while, and that's kind of the way it goes. I'm just going to leave it out for that, and you guys can type an answer, and I'm going to go ahead and start.
Dare you see a soul at the white heat, then crouch within the door, she once wrote. She called red the color most associated with passion, fire's common tint. For Dickinson, the real, true, rich life of a soul, even if it was physically sheltered, burned white hot. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Oh, it's time for the open letter? An open letter to the color white. But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment today. Oh, it's a Dalek. Stand more flagrant pandering to the Whovians. Dear White, you're a complicated and symbolic. Dalek! They're not very bright. So White, you're often associated with purity, like wedding dresses. You can symbolize heaven or the creepy, infinite nowhere where certain parts of Harry Potter and all of Crash Course Humanities take place. But many 19th century writers inverted those associations, like Melville's famous Great White Wall of Whale, the terrifying blankness of nature. And to Dickinson, White, you were the color of passion and intensity. This reminds us that our symbolic relationships aren't fixed. We're creating them as we go communally. I mean, other than Daleks, which are universally terrifying no matter what color they come in. Best wishes, John Green. Okay, let's take a close look at a poem we've already mentioned, sometimes called Poem 465, and sometimes known by its first line, I heard a fly buzz when I died. Speaking of which, here in the studio, we've had a genuine plague of flies in the last few weeks. I mean, in the lights up there are thousands of fly carcasses. Okay, let's put aside the fly carcasses and read a poem together about flies. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for the last onset, when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portions of me be assignable, and then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. Okay, first let's talk about the dashes. Some critics think that Dickinson's use of dashes as punctuation is just eccentric handwriting or else an accident. I mean, they point out that Dickinson also used similar dashes, for instance, in her cake recipes. Others argue that the use of dashes are a typographical attempt to symbolize the way the mind works, or that the dash is used as punctuation stronger than a comma but weaker than a period.
All right. So why do you think the dash is there? And I know we haven't really explored her poems and looked at it, so to speak, but I like to pull this up. On our tombstones, we have the year of death, and before that we have the year that we were born. What's in between? It's a dash, right? So there's a lot of folks that had said, and you see memes or whatever, that the dash is the most important part. It's not whether the year that you were born, it's not the year that you died, but the most important part is on that dash. What you make of that dash is the most important part. Probably this is not what she's thinking about here in the poetry. If you heard Green say that he was, there are some people that look at the dash as, the thought process of the writer. So I'm in that camp. So it's kind of like I'm writing, I put a dash, and then I will continue on. It's like thinking, what am I going to say next? Like making sure our masks are covering all our face, right? So I am that guy. So anyway, so the dash is important. Emily Dickinson does not put anything in her poetry that's not important. She is a perfectionist. She writes differently than what's expected. You would not see that writing. Well, you would expect her to write something like you would see in England, coming out of Europe, coming out of England. So the stanzas and things associated with that. You do see stanzas from time to time in her writing, but she is a little bit different. She's not as different as Walt Whitman, but she is still different. She's still going to follow some type of rhyme scheme. Sometimes she makes up what might be her own, but she's very precise. All right, so I'm gonna keep going. I'll submit that. Got it.
Than a period. Regardless, though, the appearance of a dash at the end of this poem, at the moment of death, is a very interesting choice. So in this poem, the speaker is dying, or I guess has died, in a still room surrounded by loved ones. A will is signed, and then the fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz, comes between the light and the speaker. This makes it so the narrator cannot see to see, and by now you know what happens in Dickinson poems when people can't see, they're dead. So Dickinson was just a smidge obsessed with death, which means that she got to imagine death in a lot of different ways, as a suitor, as a gentle guide, but here, death is a buzzing fly. So everyone in the room is awaiting the arrival of the king, which before Elvis took over the title in 1958 was a reference to God. But instead of the quiet, peaceful arrival of God they're expecting, it's a dirty little fly with uncertain, stumbling buzz that gets between the narrator and the light. So this poem features Dickinson at her most formal. The lines are very iambic. I heard a fly buzz when I died, the stillness in the room. And they alternate between tetrameter, 4 feet, and triameter, 3 feet. The rhyme scheme throughout the poem is A, B, C, D, which means the first line ends with one sound, the second line with yet another, the third line with another still, and then the fourth line rhymes with the second.
All right. So which of the following is an example of A, B, C, B rhyme? And you just have to look through those and find the answer. I've already marked the answer. I'll just give you a few minutes to look at that. And if you've already seen my blue dot, you probably say, okay, that's the answer, and not look at the others. So it's tempting to not see an A, B, C, B. I mean, that's just kind of weird on your writing. Anyway, it's usually A, B, right? Or something along those lines, A, B, C, A, B, C. So it's almost like an every other line. But this one is an A, B, C, B rhyme. So again, it is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three, by thy long gray beard and glittering eye. Now wherefore stoppest thou me? So And you see the stanzas kind of written out, and it's a slant rhyme. It's not a not a truly great line, but A, B, C, and then me and 3. So, all right, continue play.
The second line. But Dickinson employs her famous slant rhymes here. Like in the first stanza, room is matched with storm. In the second, be with fly. These words sort of almost rhyme, like room and storm both end in sounds, be and fly both end in hard vowel sounds, but they don't rhyme. And this discomforting lack of closure is a hallmark of Dickinson's poetry, also of most of my romantic relationships. Only in the final stanza, when death comes, do we get a full rhyme. Me, the I, is rhymed with C, the thing the I can no longer do. So is this a peaceful death? Hardly. I mean, the stillness in the room is broken by the buzzing fly. And yet with that final full rhyme, Dickinson offers us a bit of peace and closure that we didn't get in the first 2 stanzas. To return to an old theme, even though we live in an image-drenched culture, this is a good reminder that language is made out of words. And it might sound like overreading to you to say that a full rhyme brings peace, but I'm reminded of the story of Mozart's children playing a series of unfinished scales in order to taunt their father, who would eventually have to go to the piano and finish them. Poetry isn't just a series of images. It's rhythmic and it's metric, and we crave the closure of a good rhyme at the end of a poem. That's why sonnets end with couplets. Dickinson gives us that closure. And then she gives us a Jose Saramago-ing dash, the poet of paradox. Still haunting.
All right, so what's something about Emily Dickinson's poetry that you're confused or curious about? You probably are not curious at this point. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Maybe some of the ones that you've read already are confusing. I am not going to be the one to clear them up for you. I might give you some ideas, but I don't necessarily want to clear them up, because this is what happened when they found her poetry. It was actually pretty interesting. She had written all these thousands, like 1,800 poems, all right, and it was in her room, never published. And so what the family did was take it to someone, and immediately they looked through it and said, this is good, but it needs editing. So they edited it, and then they published it edited. And it wasn't until years later that they figured out, well, that's not what Emily Dickinson would have necessarily wanted. I mean, because I did tell you that she wrote precisely, right? This is how I wanted it. If she had to, if she was published, if she chose to publish on her own, and I think she did try, but it was just not, it didn't pan out for her. A couple of things, I think she was probably published in a newspaper or something like that. I mean, you guys could do that. You can send it out to, Daily Reflector, and maybe they put something in there. So, but they reverted back to her regular stuff, and so it is confusing. Again, he even talked about it in here, where we expect a rhyme in certain locations, and it's just not there. We expect certain things, even in the 21st century. We're still expecting it, so and we're not. So if you were confused by her poems, then that's good. But you also bring your experiences, and I want to reiterate that you have your own personal experiences. There's not anything that's going to be right or wrong, as long as you can back it up with what you see in the text and make explanation for it. So that's something I really want you to consider. All right, so. I think this is going to be the last part, and we'll just let him go because he's annoying. At least I think he is.
Still haunting us. Thanks for watching our Crash Course Literature mini-series. Next week, we begin a year of learning about U.S. history together. Now begins the complaining by non-Americans that we're shallow and self-interested and call ourselves Americans, even though in fact this is America. My friends, even if you don't live here, the history of the United States matters to you because we're always meddling in your affairs. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Crash Course is produced and directed by.
All right, so I wanted to show that. I thought that was pretty interesting what he said, because we're always meddling in your affairs, even if you're not American. You should be interested in American history because we're always meddling in your affairs. I thought that was very clever. So, all right, let me get back to the screen. There we go. Okay, so Emily Dickinson is a little bit different. I want to show you what you guys are working on today, because I know I'm just about running out of time. I do want to read you this from my textbook and what you would normally get if you had a textbook. And I didn't include it for a reason, because you've gotten enough biographical information from Emily Dickinson, her own Emily Dickinson, and you're actually going to work on some more today. But this is how this starts. And it's actually pretty good. A brief outline of Emily Dickinson's life reads like the plot of a story destined to become a legend. Once upon a time, there was born to a religious and well-to-do New England family a daughter whom they named Emily. As a child, she was lively, well-behaved, and obedient. She took pleasure in the busy household of which she was a part, and in the seasonal games, parties, and outings of a village snowy cold in winter, and brilliantly green and flowering in summer. At home, Emily learned to cook and sew. When she was old enough, she was sent to school where strict rules did not dampen the girls' high spirits as they enjoyed the entertainments of boarding school life. Emily took part in these, but not always with as much enthusiasm as she might have. As she said many years later, something sad and reserved in her nature made her a mourner among children. All right, I'm going to leave off right there. I have a ton more, but I want to put that in your brain about Emily Dickinson, because that kind of sets the tone for how she's writing. So when you're looking for themes or trying to identify themes in her poetry, we do see a lot of what we would call morbid scenes. So death taking her to the grave, actually escorting her to the grave like as if they were best friends. So there's something interesting about death and being friends with death. And we'll read that. We actually have it because I could not stop for death. He kindly stopped for me. And we'll talk about death in personification. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you again. And this is what we're actually doing. There is a video on here of how to submit the PDF, or how to annotate the PDF that I'm getting to. Hopefully it'll get there. You're going to read a short biography of Emily Dickinson. And actually, hang on. Let me record this part, because I know that somebody is going to